Greetings and salutations everyone, Crimson Hero here, and welcome back to Let's Play Sonic Heroes. In the last episode, we completed the bingo levels with Team Chaotix, and in this episode, we're going to be taking on Rail Canyon and Bullet Station. Time for some rail grinding, folks.
The way we like it. Cool! Alright, let me take point.
Alright there, SBO, you the man. Wait a minute, so what you're telling me is that I need to infiltrate the central station of the base. Alright. That's what you're saying, but all I'm hearing is get to the goal ring. Seriously, game, if you want us to actually consider Team Chaotix to be a completely different way of approaching the game's design, then don't make it so that their missions are just glorified goal rings just like everybody else. Yes, there are collectathons, yes, there are beat all the mooks, but at the same time, at least those are somewhat different from just go through the stage. I mean, Sonic Adventures 1 and 2 did a lot of different things in order to allow you to have different types of missions that all required you to do different things. I just kind of wish that Sonic Heroes had done that for Team Chaotix, considering that if we're going to be playing such a big portion of the game as these guys, and they only have just, if not every single one of their missions is something that's like different or unique in comparison to all the other three teams, then really why should we bother? If they're just going to be, I understand that not every single one of these missions is just get to the goal ring. I understand that like there's really only two missions that actually require you to get to the goal ring with no other limitations or conditions to meet. Like, I understand that. I'm kind of nitpicking here. I just kind of wish that, like, if we're going to be playing through the same stages 4 different times, then I just kind of wish that each team brought something new to the table. You could have, like, Team Sonics be very based on speedy platforming. Team Roses could be, could just be a pretty easy, could be an easy ride that doesn't really focus on too much combat, maybe leaving a lot of the combat-oriented sections to Team Dark. And then with Team Chaotix, you could do different mission-based stuff that would be very different from how the other 3 teams play out. Like, I understand as a game designer that you have time and money, and you have people that work for you. I understand that not all the time that you don't want to make new assets and stuff all the time. Sometimes you want to reuse assets in order to create something that's cost efficient and will get out on time. I get it. I understand. I know how the market works, and I know how these jobs work as well. I know how games are designed from most standpoints, if not all of them. I get it. I'm not trying to say that this is bad. I just wish that if there was more time, more stuff available, I really wish that this game had actually gone further with some of the ideas that were put in place here, because that would have made this a real hit out of the park. That would be great. However, that's just not really what we have right now. Instead, we just have more rail grinding. A lot of it. That isn't necessarily too fast and honestly goes by kind of... I mean, they're just... I understand that this is basically the level that focuses on rail grinding. I get it. It's in the title. It's in the title. It's Rail Station. It has to do with grind rails and trains, which are on rails, and rails can be grinded on in the Sonic universe. All right, cool. You have your level concept. Great. At the same time, though, the central mechanics when it comes to the grinding, I feel could have been at least a little bit more fleshed out, specifically in this level. I mean, we had an entire 1.5 minutes at the very start of the level where it was just rail grinding, nothing else. I just mashed the B button to just go faster so I could actually get to the actual gameplay. And that's not something I wanted to do. I mean, I want to go fast in a Sonic game, but I don't want to just blatantly skip through parts just because I'm disinterested. I feel like if they had handled this game more like Sonic Adventure 2, then things would have been a lot better. I feel like if you had mixed up different elements of platforming and rail grinding, like you did, like Sonic Team did in Sonic Adventure 2, then this would have been a lot more effective. Because right now, we just have a lot of rail grinding in the middle of the air, in open space, not actual like outer space, but just like in the open air. And really, there's not a whole lot else. I mean, occasionally, like, you make it to another station, and you're like, alright, time to beat a couple enemies, do just the tiniest little bit of extra platforming, and that's about it. I really wish that they had actually gone with something more along the lines of, like, Shadow and Sonic's final stages in Sonic Adventure 2. That would have been great, especially because with those stages, one of the most interesting aspects was the fact that you had lower gravity to work with. That was one super awesome element about the outer space levels, is the fact that gravity was given a completely new way to incorporate itself into the gameplay, and that was awesome, especially when you had different sections, especially in Sonic and Shadow stages, where you went at a 90-degree angle, which is completely different from what you were normally expecting. Yeah, we have things like loop-de-loops and slopes and hills and ups and downs and spirals and stuff like that you can use, and that's all in this level. But at the same time, there's a lot of points where it's just very level. It doesn't really dip or change at all, and most of the time, there are points where things just come up and you're not expecting them, and then next thing you know, you have to suddenly correct yourself by going into flight formation. I don't want to have to spend so much time just being super duper careful just because of needing to be in flight formation. I really wish that I could have been able to focus on being a little bit more like speed oriented, almost reckless even, and actually be able to continue to get through the levels. Where in this game, I have to constantly either make sure I'm doing something right, or at least not getting myself into trouble. But in Sonic Adventures 1 and 2, I was able to just speed through levels without a thought or care in the world, and that was fun. I enjoyed that. I want that kind of stuff to happen, and they did make that stuff happen in some of the later titles that have been coming out over the last few years. But at least during this kind of middle chunk for Sonic, things were starting to change, kind of for the worse. And yes, I know a lot of people have said certain things about, like, oh hey, well, this game is better than that game, or this game was never that good to begin with, or yada yada. Alright, everyone is open to their own opinions about games. It's human nature to just be able to just freely talk about things that you either like or dislike. I get it. I mean, that's what I'm doing right now. But I just really wish that there was elements that they carried over from Sonic Adventure that reflected in the gameplay, because I know that it's a completely different system, it's a completely different engine, and really it's completely different hardware, because originally, like, Sonic Adventures 1 and 2, regardless of the GameCube ports that they did, it was all on the Dreamcast. And yes, the Dreamcast was very much ahead of its time, but at the same time, Sega had to go from developing stuff for first party to then becoming third party, and I understand that dealing with other people's consoles is kind of a difficult thing, especially when you're trying to make the next knockout hit in your already established popular series. I mean, there's a lot of difficult aspects to game design, just not only just in terms of how you design it, but also just how you actually just make a game in general. I mean, I've already said how there are many aspects of Sonic Heroes that I enjoy, especially like things like certain aesthetics in terms of like graphics or level design, or like the different types of levels and how they harken back to the good old days of the Sega Genesis. That's great. I like that. That was a good way of keeping things nice and visually interesting. That's good. But when it comes down to the gameplay and control, where most people where everyone should agree that that's the most important thing about a game, I don't know, it's just kind of there.
Here we go.
So yeah, in this level we have to focus on finding these weapon capsules, very similar to the ones that the one that Shadow woke up in the beginning of Darkseid's story, or Team Dark's story. and we have to destroy them. 30 of them, there's more than enough, and it's not really that big of like a huge issue. Like you get it done, and there you go. Though I definitely would say that of all 14 levels and all 7 zones, I would say that Bullet Station and Rail Canyon are probably my least favorite, actually. I enjoy just the other ones better, whether they be just because of how they're laid out or the types of like stuff that you have to do in them. Just honestly, I feel like things could have been better in terms of Rail Canyon, especially when it comes to allowing you to have a grinding-based level that focuses on grinding, but also keeps things fresh.
Let's go.
I know I keep on repeating a lot of what I've said, but that's the thing about this game in particular, is the fact that it's structured in a way that it is a little bit of repetition. I mean, it's not like, yes, go and grind out the same missions, or go and grind out the same materials or enemies or whatnot, like you might find in like certain RPGs or like open world games or stuff like that. But at the same time, though, like the game, there are certain points where you look at the game over these last like 20 parts, and you just think, I've seen a lot of this stuff before, and yes, you have. I have. We've all seen it. Just, I don't really know. Like Sonic Heroes is just a strange bag of tricks. I mean, I don't think the game is bad or anything. Don't get me wrong, but just it's something that, it's a different game, and they definitely tried to make something that's new and exciting, and like they succeeded on some fronts, but other fronts did and do need a little bit more polish in order to really match up to the expectations of people, especially after what a lot of people would consider to be such great pillars of the Sonic series, being Adventures 1 and 2.
Here we go.
Man, this episode's gotten very heavy-handed in terms of just like almost like the review aspect, and like, I mean, I want to get my thoughts out on the game while I'm playing it, but I mean, like most of the time I was just kind of like, in other games that I've LP'd, like it was all about just, you know what, I'm gonna have fun first, and we're just gonna casually talk about stuff, and then during the ending credits, that's when I gonna give my general broad thoughts on the game as a whole, almost like a mini review almost. Now, the reason why I've kind of been discussing a lot of game design stuff in this game is because that it's a game that, like, I mean, I enjoy Sonic Heroes, don't get me wrong, it's just that, like, it's one that it's a Sonic game that I look at and I can play and just say, alright, I enjoy it, but not nearly as much as Sonic Adventures 1 and 2. And like, I don't want this to become a giant review, but Sonic Heroes is just a strange game in general, just because of how it's structured and the fact that if I'm going to be exposed to certain things 4 different times, then it's going to stick into my head, and certain points are going to become a lot more glaring and will stand out, whether they be good or bad. And as well as, like, the more I get into the game design and stuff, it gives me more to talk about, as well as it also is just kind of, well, wow, that was a bad decision on my part.
I'll handle it, boys.
Oh, gotta switch. Come on, let me switch. Let me switch. Well, okay. At the very least, whenever you make progression in terms of like collecting or destroying a certain number of items in the chaotic stages, it actually keeps track of how much you've destroyed, regardless of if you have made it past that checkpoint or not. As you can see, it's still 22.
Here we go.
Even though we lost progress in terms of the level progression, we haven't lost track of our objective, which is great. I enjoy that. Thank you for that. I don't want to have to go back and do the same thing again just because I accidentally screwed up. And I understand that like people would say, oh well, it's justified. You screwed up. That means you go back to the last checkpoint or the last save or whatever. I understand that. I get that mentality, and like, yeah, it works in most of the time. But at the same time, though, it is nice when certain games don't abide by those rules sometimes. It's almost like having kind of a retry button almost. Alright, so this section, there's a good number of capsules in here, so this is kind of where your mission will probably end if you've been destroying everything up until this point. Just make sure that you actually pay attention to what's coming up ahead. Maybe you want to take things a little bit slowly, but you can definitely rack up the number of capsules that you've destroyed in this section for sure. I mean, I've already skipped at least 2, so that would have been 25. At least 25 that we've managed to break. Yeah, I mean, you could probably beat the entire level just right there on that track, so. Yeah, this is one of those levels that it graciously gives you additional objects, more so than is required, which is great, and I wish that one of the levels later on would do the same, but it doesn't. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. I feel like because Rail Canyon and Bullet Station are kind of like my least favorite levels, it also and also the fact that like they kind of bring themselves to be kind of thought about in like almost a review aspect. I feel like this is like kind of the point where I just kind of sit down and just kind of like talk about exactly what I think of like the game's design. Because like I've done it multiple times whenever it comes to this zone, and I feel bad when like I have to like get so like almost review like just for a certain section of the game like that. I don't really know. Like this LP has been a strange thing, as I've mentioned at least twice already just in this part. But I mean, Sonic Heroes is something that I could have handled in many different ways. I decided to take the most normal route. I could have edited things down heavily and had like I don't know, 7 to 14 parts LP. But I felt like, you know what, if I don't show the entire game, then it would feel a little weird. And honestly, I'm kind of glad that I didn't kind of skip out on it, because like there are some sections that do change between all the different teams that are pretty cool in terms of like what they do. So like I didn't want to skip out on exactly what was going on. Plus, like it would have been a lot of planning and a lot of editing. So I was like, you know what, even though it's gonna take me a longer time to like play and commentate over everything, it definitely would be a lot less editing and like planning out. So I mean, each way has its own benefits, and also they all have their own pros and cons, but I decided to go with the most traditional way possible, because I mean, hey, it's if you're going to get this game, then just be aware that it is a game that you will basically be playing 4 different times. Yeah, but yeah, like I definitely would say that if you're going to handle a game, or at least when you of the three 3D Sonic games that I've covered so far, I would definitely say if you're going to have a multi-character, multi-perspective look at a centralized story, I feel the best way it's been done so far has been Sonic Adventure 2, followed by Sonic Adventure 1, second best, and then Sonic Heroes. And Sonic Heroes, like, it's not trying to be like a super like deep story or anything like Sonic Adventure 2 was. I mean, heck, it's almost more of like a I mean, it's a lot more like kind of a casual, not really casual, but just kind of like, I don't know, it's a very different experience from SA1 and 2. Whereas in SA1 and 2, you kind of saw different perspectives of similar events, but at least like when you saw those different perspectives, they were at least somewhat different per character, and that was interesting. Sonic Heroes doesn't really focus too much on story and kind of focuses more on gameplay, which I appreciate. It's just I just wish that things weren't all basically the same. But I've talked long enough about like the ins and outs of the game design and what I wish had been done better. I mean, we'll talk about it more as the rest of the LP finishes up, but pretty much that's about it for right now. We'll talk a little bit later. So, in the next episode of Let's Play Sonic Heroes, we'll deal with the Frog Forest levels. I'm Crimson Nero. Thank you very much for watching this episode, and until next time, everyone, fare thee well.